This is a very special podcast. In fact, it's our 21st podcast.
Woo!
Yes, I can't believe it. And Beth Jordan Chat with me, 23. And uh, just a little reminder to all our listeners, the aim of this podcast is to promote indie and self-published authors to have a bigger voice, to reach a larger audience as our subscriptions grow and as our audience grows, hopefully our writers and authors get a chance to be heard. This is the reason why this channel is in existence. And what I would really appreciate is at the end of the channel, if you would like, subscribe, and share to all your friends and family and neighbors and fellow authors as well. So, as I said, this is a special one today because we're doing it differently. I have my co-host, Giannis Zappas.
Hello, everyone.
And we have invited a very special guest from across the pond, in fact, from Atlanta, Georgia. Oh, he's looking for himself. He's a special guest, he's saying. And his name is Gideon Hodge, aka Nikolas Baxter. Hello, Gideon.
Yes, a man of many names and hats. So yeah, the Gideon Hodge. So Gideon Hodge is everything that I've done. Most of my writing, all of my film work and acting and things like that, I've done as Gideon Hodge. I took on the Nikolas Baxter name when I started writing for children and young adults. So that way, and it's been a lot of extra work on my end to have all that social media,
Yeah,
put together, but essentially to keep a little bit of a buffer zone between, children's work and my stuff that's more for grown-ups.
yeah.
Although I'm seeing many other people in the sphere that are not doing that, and I don't know. I'm starting to wonder if I've just taken on more work for myself than I needed to.
That's true, because in fact, by having two names, you have two personas, maybe. So just, in fact, it'd be quite a good place to start with that, the two personas. How do you have you created a whole new self as Nicholas Baxter?
Not necessarily. I mean, I still try to be me in both facets. I just know that I'm very clear on which topics I tackle as each under each pseudonym.
Hmm.
The Nicholas Baxter content is much more family friendly, and I'm in talks with somebody about doing some children's like educational programming for next year. So obviously that will all be under Nicholas Baxter. Gideon Hodge, different shows and productions that I've been in, and there's a few productions set to start filming next year. But if you've never worked in the film industry, it's a lot of hurry up and wait. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of meetings, there's a lot of discussions, and then eventually you get a schedule somewhere in there that's like, okay, this is the day you actually need to show up, and this is when we'll start filming.
Okay, we want to come to that a little bit later on. But what I really wanted to talk about a little bit is Yanni and I were at the Caithness Book Fair in a place called Merkel in the Highlands of Scotland.
Oh
Highlands,
yeah.
Merkel?
Exactly.
Merkel? The Caithness Book.
Yeah.
So we actually met Gideon there. A surprise for us to with his lovely wife Aurora. So the real surprise for us to see Gideon turn up in this tiny little book fair, in this tiny little hall, and we were both wondering, what are they doing over here? So maybe you'd like to enlighten us and tell us, how did you come to the book fair?
Sure, sure. I actually ran into Glenn Salisbury, who, was the kind of the coordinator of all of it. He and Carolyn,
Yeah,
Laura, sorry, and we started a dialogue on Facebook. We talked back and forth for a little bit, and Scotland's kind of always been on my to-do list, and he was like, "Look, we don't really have resources to bring you over here." And I'm like, no, I'm not asking for that. I just want to be in Scotland. And so this was kind of an opportunity to get two birds with one stone, get to visit someplace that's been on my bucket list for a very long time, and to present and to share my work with people at the same time.
yeah, yeah. In fact, Yanni wants to have a conversation with you about that most wonderful presentation that you did at the book fair.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I've been to many book fairs and I've never seen authors present their work the way you did that, as well as Mark Bridgman. So it was really very enlightening, but I loved what you said. So
Thank you.
over to you, Yanni.
That's true indeed. I loved your presentation, Gideon, and I would say it's more of a hybrid between a workshop, a clinic, and a presentation at the same time.
Yeah.
So you managed to fuse all three together, which makes it interactive for the audience as well. You know, it's not like a really dry presentation, but interactive at the same time.
Mm.
Uh, so my question for you was like, could you share some of the tips with our listeners regarding the central plot, which was the main theme of your presentation?
Sure, sure, I'd love to. I've actually done a couple of workshops since then where I've delved into that same topic as well, and I've been very kind of surprised by how engaged other authors have become on this when I start workshopping it with the crowd, as you remember.
Yeah.
Um, and talking about how to use this concept in their writing. So the central question is essentially, what's the core of your story? There are a lot of different elements in writing. There's your story, your plot, your character arc, your conflict, your theme. There's all these different elements. And I know, and I've seen pushback online, in forums and chats and things like that against, having this delineation of all these topics that they feel like it's limiting to a degree. In my estimation, it's more like being a doctor or a surgeon. It's not that we don't use these terms to limit, but we use these terms to address certain issues that might be going on in the story. And if we've got concise terms, it makes it much easier to unravel what might be the issue with the story. If you read somebody's book and you're trying to give them, usable feedback, saying, I just didn't like it. There's not a lot they can do with that. They're like, okay, what didn't you like? I don't know. I got bored around page 50 and I stopped reading. And they're like, okay, and that's that at least lets them know there's a problem somewhere between page 1 and 50. But if you can talk with somebody and say, okay, I don't see what's going on with your characters. I feel like there's no character growth here. Um, the tone of the story seems to shift in ways that doesn't really seem consistent throughout the narrative. When you start talking in specifics like that, it makes it a lot more tangible in dealing with what the potential problems or pitfalls in the story might be. So the central question, in my opinion, is that question that kind of ties everything else together.
Mm.
And with that, you get a lot of other things line up. So once you have an idea of what your central question is, you're like, this is the story I'm telling, and this is why I'm telling the story. So, a lot of writing feedback and seminars are about the what, the how. For me, if you can address the why of the story, it helps you bring everything else in line because now oh, this is not only what story I'm telling, but why I'm telling it, what the tone is going to be like, what the interaction is, between the characters is going to be like. I think I said this in the workshop there. If you're telling an espionage story and part of the story is part of that central question is who can you trust in dire circumstances, the relationships between the characters are going to be a lot more fraught with peril of, who's potentially double crossing the main character, who's got information that they're not sharing, who's lying, versus if it's a comedy, there's not going to be that same amount of tension amongst the relationships and the characters. It's going to be a little more loose. There might be some cloak and dagger in the story, but it's not the focus. So it's where are you focusing your attention in the story to create the type of narrative that you want to tell. And then there was a lot of different examples. One that I think stuck out to me, which was humorous to me while I was writing it, was the overlap between The Great Gatsby and The Little Mermaid, which is not two stories that tend to get connected very much. But to me, the and the question, the way I posited it there in Thurso or Merkel, was what are we willing to sacrifice to get what we want? Since then, I've come up with an addendum of, and what does that do to us as a person?
Mm.
Because in both those stories, them giving up what they have to get what they want ultimately destroys both of them in the books. Little Mermaid, the Disney version, dolled up a little bit, but I mean the Little Mermaid dies at the end of the book. So sorry for spoilers there. And Great Gatsby. Gatsby dies at the end of his story because neither one of them really got what they wanted, and they gave up so much of themselves that it really wasn't. It's more a story of peril that
Mm.
it's like they probably would have been better off had they not gone that direction in the first place.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was interesting that in The Little Mermaid, we watched the movie together just a couple of weeks ago, and she lived happily ever after.
Right. Yeah. The
I
movie
didn't
very
know she
different.
died. I didn't know she died in the book.
So the book is actually very different from the cartoon. So the in the book, there's a certain amount of Christian, I'm loath to use the term mythology because I feel like people are going to take my meaning the wrong way there. But in Christian theology and Christian ideology, so in the story, mermaids can live for I think like 300 years, but they don't have a soul. So when they die, they just turn back into sea foam and become part of the ocean once more. But humans have souls and can go to heaven. So the Little Mermaid gets taken with that concept and she wants to gain a soul and thereby transcend, go to heaven, but she has to give up her voice to do it. So that's the same. But also in the book, her having legs is quite painful for her. They don't really touch on that in the cartoon because it would have been a little too dark, but the process is quite painful for her. Whole series of events takes place, but essentially, to get what she wants, she would have had to kill somebody. The prince. The prince ends up falling in love with this other princess that's not her. Um, and she's going to lose her opportunity to find this happiness and find this redemption. And she's told, and I forget who by, but essentially that if she can stab the prince and use the blood to put on her legs, it'll turn her back into a fish. There's a whole thing,
Yeah.
but yeah, it just goes in a very bad direction. And there's metaphor or comparable notes that you could take from that story and come up with a much darker story if you wanted to of the things we give up within ourselves to get what we want. I know there's a number of movies made, probably in the 90s, about the workaholic parent
Hmm.
and how their children kind of get ignored while the parent is, chasing after the next big deal, the next big case, and their family life is falling apart. So that's very much the same concept, though, is like, what are we giving up to get what we want? And is that really what we wanted? And sometimes that's the journey, is having the protagonist think they know what they want at the start of the story and then learning what they want or what they really need throughout the course of the narrative.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting because after I heard you talk about the central plot or the central
Question.
question,
Yep.
the first book that I have written, I want to almost rewrite part of it because I realized after listening to what you had to say, there
Mhm.
was definitely, as a first-time author, a lot of things I wasn't aware of.
Understood. And the thing is, I mean, you could release another version of it or another volume. There's other authors that have done that. Stephen King, I think when he first released The Stand back in the 70s, his editors made him cut a lot of that book. And then years later, when he was a much more established author and could kind of get away with more, he re-released The Stand with like an extra 200 pages put back into the book that he had always wanted to have there. But that's another reason why I like delving into the minutia of storytelling, because now, like you said, there's a portion you want to change about the book. You don't feel like you have to rewrite all of it.
No, just a portion of it.
Right. And so when we can kind of narrow down on things like plot, theme, character arc, things like that, or central question, we can say, oh, if I change these couple of things here, the whole story reads differently.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm glad we were able to have that connection on that story. That's great.
Yeah, it really resonated with me, and I thought we'll have to invite Gideon back to do a workshop for us on that very theme, and invite a
Thank you.
lot.
I would love to. And I
Yeah,
love to do Q&A with people in the audience.
yeah.
I just did one at Conjuration in Atlanta a couple weeks ago, and I mean it became a pretty lively group. It was everybody was kind of timid at first, but then once one or two authors starts asking more specific questions, the other people feel more comfortable coming forward. And there was one point where one of the authors, we're walking through the process as we're talking, and then he stops, and I saw him get kind of physically uncomfortable. He's like, "Oh, but if I did that in the story, if I tweaked this thing and changed this, then that would," and I watched his shoulders tense up, and I was like, "Yes." I was like, "You're uncomfortable right now, aren't you?" He's like, "Yeah," because I'm thinking about like all the things that are going to happen in the story now. I'm like, write that, go to that uncomfortable place and see where it takes you. You don't. I think because of mass marketing, we tend to feel like we need to play it safe in our storytelling. But I think if you go to the uncomfortable places, if you go to those places that make you kind of physically tense up, that's where magic's going to happen. That's where you're going to find a story that is uniquely you.
And that is what will create that unique voice. Don't you think so?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think the authors, at the end of the day, they need to express their own thoughts, their own world. That's the whole point of this genre, to go somewhere that no one else has gone before.
Right. Or in a
So
way that nobody else will or can.
Yeah.
Each one of us has our own, backstory, our own history. Like Yanni, you're from Greece, correct?
correct, yes.
Right. So you've got elements of your past of being from there that I don't have. I'm not going to be able to tell that story the way you would. So all these pieces that we bring into it, and a lot of times we're not even aware of it in our writing. That's the fun thing about like teaching writing or even teaching acting, which I taught for a number of years. A lot of acting teaching came from actors watching other actors do these things that these actors weren't even aware they were doing. They just process the stuff naturally. You have certain people that are just natural storytellers, and God bless them, that just do these things and not even know they were doing it. And then other people started watching and be like, okay, how does this work? How do we figure out what's going on behind the eyes on this? And so that's where writing and acting techniques came, studying that came from. We've had great stories and great performers for centuries. It's only in like the last 100 years, I think, that we've really started studying it as a discipline that we can pass on to other people.
That's true. And thank you for passing this part of the acting and the screenplay in the theatrical play, because recently we watched Hamilton in London.
Oh, yes, yes, we
So
did.
the musical Hamilton. And
Mm,
I couldn't believe that the actors and the actresses were actually singing for 2 hours and a
Yes.
half with like a 20-minute break in between.
Yeah.
Initially, I thought this was a recording that we were listening to.
Yeah.
I mean, my hat's off to everyone and to every actor and actress in the world, because taking the theater out to the audience in that way requires remarkable skills. And I'm sure you're part of it as well from your own experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
it's been a lot of fun. One of the reasons that I hope more people start going back out to theater again, now in the post-pandemic age and also in the digital age, where I feel like we're just so bombarded with multimedia. I feel like theater is a genuine experience that cannot be replicated on video. The other thing that I don't think a lot of people that haven't, or I'm sorry, how do I want to phrase this? I think a lot of people that have not gone to theater or have not gone to very many shows don't realize it's never the same show. It's never the same performance because, every night it's live, things can go wrong. An actor might be listening or an actor might say a line a particular way and another actor is listening to that. And if they're keyed in, they hear that difference in the tone, that difference in the delivery, and they respond to it in kind. And now that's a completely different scene than it was the night before.
Yeah. That's a really, really good point, actually. No two shows are ever the same.
Mm-mm.
Never. Yeah.
So to continue from that note, on a personal basis, from your own experience, at what extent has this transformative power of the narrative affected you? And like in terms of, was it just a rejoice of your mood? Was it a change in a life practice or a daily habit after watching a theatrical play or a movie or reading a book? So could you think of any example?
So are you asking how it affected me when I was watching theater? Is that the question?
Exactly, yes. Theater or a movie or reading a book, how has it changed you as a person?
I mean, there's definitely been a number of books where I kind of sat in stunned silence after I was finished with the book. I'm trying to remember specifics right now, but I I'm gonna sound a little biased as an author, but I still see reading books as the purest medium because it's all in here. So much is going on in here. The what the characters are wearing, the facial expressions they're showing, the intonations, the way they're speaking to each other, all of that is happening in your mind. None of it is being fed to you. And so you're immersing your imagination in this other place. And at least for me, it's almost like waking up from a dream. I'll sit up and I'll look around. I'm like, oh, I'm in this room. I almost forgot where I was for a little bit because I was just so enmeshed in what I was reading. And I feel like people that don't read books, are cheating themselves of that. Honestly, it's such an amazing experience that you can't get from reading a tweet or a blog or an article. Because the other thing about books is that it delves into a topic so deeply. You spend 300, 400, 500 pages exploring this concept from all these different angles and how all these different characters come at it. And there's nothing else like that that allows you to have that experience and to explore that idea so thoroughly. Um, I'm trying to think of a specific instance where I just really felt. I mean, there's definitely been a number of performances where there was a show called The May. I haven't seen it in quite a while, and it's the breakdown of this woman who is trying to pursue her art while connecting with her daughter and her failing marriage. And it's the schmuck husband just keeps coming back and ruining everything, and she keeps dropping things for him. And it was a tragedy. And it was just, but the rich performance that I saw from the actors that portrayed these characters really engrossed me in it. And I think, had it been a slightly weaker performer or a bad night, or the actor had not been on their game, I think it would have been easier to disconnect from the story. But because the actress was so engaging, I wanted her to succeed. I wanted her to do better. And so every time, the character sabotages herself throughout the course of the story, it hurt that much more because, she had so much energy and life and charisma. And then when you watched it get dimmed and shut down throughout the course of the story, it was just painful to watch at certain points.
Which kind of brings me to something. As reading your bio, um, and you've had an extraordinary life. Like you've gone from tell us about it. You've gone from you're currently an author, but you've been a film actor, stage performer. How how did all of that begin to lead you to where you are right now?
Gosh, I'm trying to think of where to start on that. Um, I mean, I guess I've had.
If you want.
Where
Sure,
everything
sure.
started to go wrong.
All right, here we go. We're going live. Um, Off the script. So I would say a lot of my life has been kind of a series of identity crisis where I was trying to decide who I was at that given point in time. I knew it was always going to be some mix of acting and writing. But I was in a rock band for a little while. I did improv shows for a while. I ran off with the circus at one point. I don't know if we ever got a chance to talk about that, but I was a fire spinning, fire breathing mime slash clown, depending on the show.
Wow.
Uh, that was pretty fun. I was working at a bookstore chain at the time, and I needed the time off for the tour. And my manager tells me later on that she's in a meeting with all the other like district managers and they're figuring out scheduling. And she's like, all right, well, my guy Gideon's going to be out for a couple months this summer. I need an extra person at my store for that time. And they're like, well, where's he going? And she says, he ran off with the circus. And they all laughed and they're like, no, really, where'd he go? And she's like, no, really, he ran off with the circus. Um, so I would kind of meet people, and the people that I would meet would say, hey, we're doing this show over here, or this group over here has this thing coming up. There was a movie role that I was offered because a director had seen me in a play, and then he spoke to one of my castmates who he knew and said, hey, I'm looking for a guy that can do fight choreography in this upcoming film. And the guy was like, well, Gideon does fight choreography, you should talk to him. Next thing I know, I'm meeting with him. I do a read through, and I was offered the role, and that was how I did a film called Rappaccini's Daughter, which is a Hawthorne story. Hawthorne, oh yeah. So Rappaccini's Daughter, and that was a really fun film. Uh, so yeah, I would kind of find myself pulled in these different directions. I would say over the last few years, especially since becoming a parent, and I need to be, home more often, writing made more sense. It was something that I could do in the wee hours of the morning or the evening. But to me, and I think I don't know that a lot of people look at it this way, but to me, acting and writing is two sides of the same coin because it's a chance for me to just delve into my imagination and see where that takes me. And so that's just been a lot of fun. Acting more of a collaborative adventure, I'm connecting with other people, the director's vision, the other actors' visions, and seeing how it all coalesces in the end. Writing, a lot more solitary of a pursuit, where it's a lot of time of me alone, going through notes, doing research, troubleshooting, writing ideas, going back through them. And I love both processes. I'm asked often, which one I prefer, and I don't really have because it's like, do I prefer warm or cold weather? I like things about both of them. I like walking around in the sunshine and but I like bundling up inside and sipping hot cocoa and watching the snowfall. And I find joy in both sides of those. And in the same regard, I find joy in writing and acting. It's just different sides of, how I get to apply my imagination to it.
Yeah, yeah. So, um, we picked up two of your books at the book fair in Cape Ness.
Mm.
Kazimer the Cat.
Kazimer the Cat, and I can't pronounce the name of your other book.
Aethersphere?
Ethersphere.
How do you say it?
Ethersphere.
Ethersphere, which I have started to read. In fact, I was reading it last night in bed. The first
Okay, okay. Yay.
I did. I said, and I loved the two young boys and the little boy and the young guy. He must be about 14 years old, I think, who a gear in the clock has fallen down into the clock tower and he has to go retrieve it in order to
Okay,
make
okay.
the clock. So I was really beginning to enjoy that. But yeah, I like these stories. So this is teen fantasy. So you've got two genres, you've got two age groups. You've got Kazimer
Yes.
the Cat, which I think is also for adults, not just children.
Mhm.
And
Right.
then you've got this new genre, which looks to me like teen fantasy. So of all the genre that you could maybe have started to write, you chose to write this. So how did you come to do that? Or what was your heart's what was your heart saying to you about this particular area of
Sure.
genre?
Well, for Casimir was a story that I just kind of puzzled out because it was like the behavior of cats has always fascinated me, and so Casimir was just my explanation of why cats have sort of the zany behavior they have, where like cats will just stare off into space, and you're like, what are you looking at, or they'll spin around and run off like they're chasing something or something's chasing them, and I'm like, there's nothing over there. What is going on?
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, what if they're fighting the forces of darkness? And then it just kind of went from there. Like they're fighting boogeyman and goblins, but we can't see them. It's their little secret world that only they can see. And so that was kind of how the story of Casimir, developed.
Yeah.
With Aethersphere, I had wanted to, um, I've written in high fantasy or fantasy for a long time, but I had never gotten anything out that I was like, I need to publish this. I guess part of it was I didn't feel like I had an entirely unique story yet. It was a little too much like other things that I had read. But when I started developing Aethersphere, I wrote in the world for a little while before I finally realized it was going to be a young adult book or a teen fantasy book. And so once I went in that direction, I was like, okay, I'll tell it from this point of view. And there's a decent amount of backstory that will come out in the future novels, but it was sort of what made the most sense to me as far as making it an overall narrative between the different books. One, because whenever I tried writing it from the adult point of view, I felt like I had to give away too much in the beginning. Whereas focusing on the children, I can trickle out the information a little bit more because the adults are kind of like, oh, you don't need to know this, and the kids are like, wait, what's going on? So if I tell the story from the point of view of the experts that know all the intricacies of what's going on, a lot of it's giving away very early, and it's a lot of info dumps, which is a term that I've heard used. Whereas with the kids, they're having genuine conversations with each other as they're trying to puzzle these things out and figure out what's going on around them. So I felt like the mystery of the story unveiled a lot more organically from their point of view.
Yeah, I do love. There's another author, as he's an indie author, and he's just started writing. He's called Paul Underwood, and he writes teen fantasy. And
Hmm.
I haven't read too much teen fantasy, but I really got into it. And I thought, I love the genre because even as an adult, it doesn't matter. It's, teen fantasy is, what sort of age group would you say teen fantasy is?
I would say anywhere from 12 to 17.
Yeah, so I think I'm my 15-year-old self when I'm reading these books.
Right, right, right.
And I love it. I love it. It's a different world to the world of fairies and science fantasy. It's different. And one of the things I don't know yet if it's going to come through in your story, but in this other story, in Paul's story called A Storm Incoming, there was very much the hero's journey that comes through. And I'm just wondering if that's going to happen with you, but I'll soon find out what it is. I don't want to give away the story because I think it's going to be. I think you've written two books already in this particular.
Book two, I actually just got the cover art back for book two, and my editor, a colleague of mine, is helping me format the cover. So book two will be out here very shortly.
All right. Okay.
And then be on to book three.
Yeah. Just want to go back to Kazimer. I think we both loved the
Yes,
illustrations.
the illustrations were remarkable.
They were more than that.
Exceptional.
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 Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just.
Well, that was the artwork of Kodako Mori, is her author or her pen name. I don't know if it's a real name, but that's her work, and she actually just did the cover art for book two on Aethersphere.
Oh, she did. Okay. But
Yeah.
but Kazimer, that is such a cat with an attitude. Such an attitude.
It's a cat hero.
Yes, a cat hero. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Yeah. So do you see yourself writing any more follow-ups to Kazimer, or is it going to be just a one-off?
I would like to. So I had two other like kid stories that I wanted to write like that. It's finding an illustrator that has the scheduling to kind of work alongside me on that. And then budgeting for that. But yeah, I had one that was going to be sort of a more simplistic fairy tale about a small person. I called them the Nubbins. It's very silly, kind of. It was so my daughter, when she was very young, I called her a Nubbins. She was just kind of round and chubby and bald. And so the Nubbins kind of became these little like gnome-like creatures that lived in this forest. And it was going to be a story about one of those Nubbins is having to go out off into the world and see the places that the forest that she lived in kind of protected her from, and some of the dangers from the big people outside. There was like a decent amount of magic and stuff like that. Like the defenses of that forest had started like weakening, and nobody was really sure why. But kind of silly. And then the other one, the working title was The Unicorn Princesses, until I found out there's a book series of that exact name. So I'll have to update that. But I did read through a couple chapters of The Unicorn Princesses, and I'm safe on story. The stories couldn't be more different. I just have to decide on a different title.
Yeah, yeah. So you came to Scotland, and did you come with the express purpose of a book tour? Or was this just because you came because and it just happened to be that the reason I'm asking you is because a lot of us as indie authors struggle with marketing our books. It's a
Right,
big,
right.
big problem. We most of us start writing because we love it, don't we? And then we
Yeah,
suddenly find we published it and we have to market it. And that is, oh my God, it's a headache.
yeah.
So
It's
how do you do it?
So secondary because we really only had one day in Inverness, and then I think we had one full day back there after the festival. So that was the focus of our trip. Our trip was all planned around that. But marketing for an indie author is yeah, it's difficult. I've kind of got a new lease on being an indie author. So my first book came out in 2014, so a little while back. And I very much made the mistake of thinking that my book's done. Now people are just going to line up to buy it.
Mm.
I just got to post it online and sales are going to roll in. I'm done. I've done the work. And yeah, exactly. As you already know, that's like a guy is writing the book and getting it out there. But marketing is such a huge part of it. So what shifted my thinking was I had complained for a few years about I was like, I hate marketing my book. I don't want to do that. And it wasn't until I heard another author say it, hearing my words come out of their mouth, and they didn't know I'd already said this before. I was just hearing them say, "Yeah, I like writing. I just don't want to market my books." And I was like, I guess none of us do.
No.
And so that's the work. And that was when it occurred to me that I was like, that this is the work. I have to get out there and let people know about these books and go to events, and just find ways that I can engage with the public in a way that's meaningful to them. Because that's the other trap is to just blast, hey, I've got a book out, come buy my book, and just to do that. So that's when I started doing workshops again, so that way I could kind of, I'm giving something to people and then, at the end of it or in my, hashtags or links, hey, by the way, I do have these books available for purchase if you want to check them out. If not, thank you for coming out. Thank you for listening to me. And it's been very nice to engage. So sometimes people will buy them at the workshop, sometimes they won't. I probably sell the most of my books at tables. So just having a table, at an event. But I'm also not afraid to just talk to people all day long,
Yeah.
and if the conversations lead to a sale, great. And if they don't, I got to meet a lot of nice people at that event.
Yeah.
So that's been that journey, but is the job. It's not just the writing. Writing is part of the job, editing is part of the job, formatting and distribution is part of the job, but marketing is a huge part of the job. And once I just accepted that like that's part of what being an author is, at least today, in today's market, then I feel like things have been a lot smoother for me.
Yeah. You've accepted marketing goes hand in hand with writing. And in fact, it was
Mhm.
it was interesting. It's a year and a half ago, I think now, I published my book and I've struggled with the marketing. And I went to a book reading at Leg, which is further up from this, I don't know, it's sort of halfway between Inverness and Thurso. And
I thought you said further up from Thurso. I was like, I think you're in the ocean if you go further up from Thurso.
no, from Inverness to Thurso, in between is Leg. It's a
All
very
right.
dark. I tell you, it's a very dark road to Leg. It really is. And it was a book club, and the organizer, it was the Leg Library, and the librarian there. She's from Morocco with a very heavy Scottish accent now. But she was
Hmm.
amazing because almost everybody in the book club had read my book. So they were
Oh,
prepared.
wow.
So there were 8 or 10 of them, and 2 of them hadn't read the book. So they were sat there, and I was reading bits of it, and they had read the book. And after I finished reading bits and pieces, not a whole chapter, they asked me questions for the first time. I've done lots of book readings. For the first
Right.
time, were really in depth and incisive. And I thought, oh my God, these people really have taken my book on board. And there were questions that even I hadn't thought about. And I
Hmm.
thought, this is remarkable. And from that moment, I suddenly thought, I've got to carry on with this marketing. I've got to carry on doing it because there are people out there who are really interested in what an author has written. Maybe they don't have
Yeah.
an opportunity to even talk to the author about it and find out. So that was a big turning point. And like you, this is going to be a part and parcel of writing, as you say. Yeah.
Well, also, and this is something that occurred to me that hit me as an actor, is that opportunity begets opportunity.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of talk about like manifesting and things like that. But to me, it's the more you get out there, the more people you meet, the more like-minded individuals you have the chance to connect with, the more people that are going to like your work and like you. And so, I mean, just at this last event, I was told about 4 other festivals that I needed to apply to. And then not only that, they were like, and you want to talk to so and so, or you want to call this person, or hey, this person over here down the hall at this event right now helps run this other event. let me introduce you. And so, that stuff doesn't happen if I'm just sitting at home running Amazon ads all day. You have to get out there and meet people. And the same thing with acting. When you're acting, the more gigs you're doing, the more people you meet, the more referrals you get to other jobs. I'm finding a lot of similarity to that in the arena of literature. As you go out and you meet people and you connect with people, those people don't live in a vacuum. Like you having a podcast, or other people that I've met that are like, oh, I know this person. Let's get you connected with that, and then your network starts to grow, and you've got more opportunities to share your work and to speak with people.
Thank you, Gideon. I think this has been a remarkable conversation, wouldn't you say so?
It was a
Immaculate,
lot of fun.
please.
And
Thank you so much for having me.
no, it's been a pleasure. I think what you have talked about and what you've touched on, I think is really good for our listeners because they need to. Well, not they need, it's good for them to get the background that you've given us, especially about the writing of a book. Because I'm sure there are lots of people out there who listen would love to write, but they don't know how to start. So just you explaining a little bit more, maybe give them a bit of confidence and understanding. So we will.
Sure. I've also got other videos up on YouTube if they want to check any of those out. I also do consulting. If they ever want to hit me up on GideonHodge.com, we can discuss, if anybody would like to do that. I didn't realize I still had my sticker on my shirt. My daughter put that on me earlier.
See it, sorry.
I can't do it.
Oh, I can do it.
Yes, you
I can
can.
believe in myself. I've got the sticker. I can do it.
Gideon, it's been absolutely wonderful. So just to finally, where can our listeners buy your books?
I am on Amazon.uk.
Okay.
I know it's on Barnes& and Noble, but I don't know if Barnes& and Noble is available over there. But I do know Amazon.uk does carry all three of my books currently.
Okay, that's good to know. And after we've spoken on YouTube, I do put a lot of information about you and about where they can buy the books. So
Excellent.
I hope that you will get a response from our listeners and they'll come directly.
That'd be great. I would love to hear from them.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you for all the insights, Gideon, from my part as well.
Yeah.
It was immaculate conversation.
Yeah.
You gave us some insights on how all these different arts interrelate together, cinema, theater, screenplay, book writing, circus acting, miming, pantomiming, everything is expressions of the soul.
Yes.
And
Right. It's all about sharing an experience or a connection.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if the books don't sell as much as we wish, then we can always turn them into a canvas for a painter, because I just reminded from an artist that uses book pages collated
Oh, yes, it's a collage.
together, and he paints on the book pages, paintings. So
Oh, I don't know about that yet.
I don't want to be too dramatic here.
So sure. Do you know, Gideon, just as we end, when you talked about a circus, I think there was a time when circuses were very big all around the world, and especially well in England, and you'd hear stories of children running away to the circus to join the circus. A common thing, kids would run off to join the circus because it sounded like a glamorous life.
I mean, we think so. It doesn't pay very well, I'll be
No.
honest, but it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun because the people you meet in the circus is it would sound like I was making it up. Some of the people I've met, because I mean, I would meet contortionists, I would meet jugglers, I would meet unicycle riders, but I would meet I met a unicycle rider juggler that was a neuroscience major. I would meet this other person that was a dancer contortionist that had just come back from Morocco, and so like these people that just had all these wonderful experiences. One of the guys was a slackline trapeze artist that had moved there from, I want to say, Colombia, and he had these wonderful stories that he would share with me. And there's also this very strong sense of community in circus and vaudeville performance that like we kind of already know each other when we sit down. Sort of like authors, authors, there's a certain sense of community there because we know we spent these immensely long time, by ourselves working and pouring ourselves into this, this book that we've created. So there's this shared experience that we all have.
Thank you, Gideon. I've really enjoyed chatting with you, and I hope we get to meet you again sometime very
I
soon.
look forward to it.
Thank you, and have a lovely holiday.
Thank you.
Yes, happy holidays to you as well.
End of December. Thank you, Gideon. Bye for now. And please
Thank you
say
much.
hello to Aurora from us.
Definitely, I will pass that along.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.